Hi, everybody. My name's Baroness Disa Birkilundi. Um, I am the Baroness of Glamere in the Kingdom of Antir. I've been in the SCA and in Antir itself for over 20 years. I've been teaching this class for over 12 years. Um, it's actually the first class that I ever taught. My main focus in art is posement and Birkilundi in the 10th century, but wire weaving was my first love in the arts, and I still enjoy teaching it. I don't do it as much anymore, but I really do enjoy teaching it. So, just a quick overview of the class. We'll go over a short history about wire weaving and what materials we need. Then we'll talk about the different steps in wire weaving. So the first thing will be creating your base, and then actually starting the weave, adding extra wire. That's always the part that people get stuck on. Um, and then running your weaving through the draw plate. That's my favorite part of wire weaving. And then finishing your piece. So, um, wire weaving has been found in excavations all over Scandinavia. Um, I found it initially. I mean, you can find it in all sorts of books and things, and in different places it looks a little bit different. The this first collection here is from a Sami hoard that was found in Finland, and I just love this. I show this one because I really love this necklace here. It's absolutely beautiful, and I love that it's got the little knots that are around the necklace. I think that's just beautiful. I haven't done it yet, but hopefully eventually I will actually do that. The second piece is this one right here. And this was actually the first one that I did any sort of research on and was the reason that I contacted a museum for the first time. Um, this is was from the 10th century in Sweden. It was found in 1780 under a rock by a local farmer. Um, it's incredibly, it's in incredibly good shape. This is actually the catalog card from the Historica Museet in Stockholm, and so you can see the whole thing here. This is obviously this is in Swedish, and the um, I contacted the museum because I had questions about this one. This is actually the same one, and it was found. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, this is the same one, and it was found in or I was able to get in touch with the museum and ask questions about it because I was only able to find just a tiny picture of it. And I was very curious because people always look at this Thor's hammer that's on it, but the necklace itself isn't shown. And so I really wanted to find out more about the necklace. So I contacted the museum, and they were so wonderful and helpful. Um, and if you've never contacted a museum, don't ever be afraid to do it. I've had nothing but wonderful experiences. So she actually, this was long, long ago, so things weren't quite as accessible online. So she actually emailed me copies of these pictures, this one and this one. And this one, of course, is exciting because it actually has scale, which is always awesome. And then she actually translated this card for me, which was so incredibly helpful. And that's how I knew that it was found under a rock by a local farmer, which I just think is so cool. So materials for wire weaving. We'll talk about wire first. So what was most commonly found, it has been silver, and that's generally what I use. If I don't use silver itself, which this necklace here that I'm wearing is actually made of silver, um, most of the time I'll actually use a craft wire, so it's a copper wire that's a silver coat. And when I'm weaving, the wire that I'm using is between a 26 and a 22 gauge wire. Again, just experiment and see what you like the best. 24 gauge is what this is, and it's what I commonly use. 22 gauge makes a much more robust uh, weave. It's a lot stronger and it's a little bit thicker, but it's a little harder on my hands. And then the 26 gauge makes a much finer weave. I like to use those to maybe hang things off of my brooches. That's always a nice way to use that. Or little kids. If I make necklaces for little kids, I usually use a 26 gauge. Um, the 18 to 20 gauge is what I use for finishing. So at the very end, when I'm creating the loops and that kind of thing, um, I'm using an 18 or 20 gauge. Generally, for me, I have some issues with my hands, so I use a 20 gauge, but 18 is just fine. My preferred wire is artistic wire. Um, I really, really like the brand. They have a really nice non-tarnish silver wire that works really well. It's got a plastic coating on it, and so it tends to you don't get that kind of gray look after a while. It stays really nicely, which with the actual silver, you end up with it kind of graying after time. Um, so if you are using actual silver, be sure to use dead soft wire. When I started weaving, I didn't really know anything about the hardness of wire of metals, and so I think I got a I did not get a dead soft wire, um, and it was very difficult to weave, and it was like weaving a needle. It was really really painful because I kept poking myself and it was not fun. So if you're going to use silver, make sure that you use a dead soft wire. It will harden as you weave, because you are messing with it. You're pulling on it and stuff. So it'll get harder as you weave. For pliers, so I actually have them here. So you're going to want some wire cutters. So you can use wire cutters like this, that have just the snipper on them, or you can use the ones that look more like this, that have the cutter kind of here. Either of those will work. Anything that cuts wire. Um, you're going to want some round pliers as well. So these ones, if you can see, yeah, those ones have a round point to them, and that will help you create your finishing loops at the very end. A draw plate, I did not pull out a draw plate, but a draw plate is basically a little 6-inch board that has different holes in it, different size holes in it that you draw your wire through. Um, you can purchase those or you can make your own. If you do make your own, use a hardwood. I prefer oak, just because you're drawing wire through it, which will kind of act like a file. And so your holes will get warped and wider as you go, the longer you use it. So we talked about this a little bit before, but now we're recording. So for a dowel, I use about a 6-inch long dowel. Oh, you can't see what I'm doing, only the PowerPoint. Okay. So for the dowel, we're going to use a 6-inch long dowel. Um, and those are, uh, you can use, I prefer to use anywhere between like a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, but people use even bigger. Um, uh, once we once we go through the PowerPoint, I can pull out of the PowerPoint, and then I'll show you pictures of what's going on. So the size of the dowel, the wideness of the dowel, not the length, will change what your finished piece looks like. Okay, so if you look here, so these two necklaces were actually made. This necklace here was made with this. This necklace here was made with this dowel. Okay, and and then this necklace was made with this dowel. This is the same hardness. This is the same exact wire. The only difference is that this one was made with this dowel and this one was with this dowel. So you can see the change, right? This one looks a lot more compact, right? And this one is a lot. The loops are a little more stretched out. Okay. So the last thing is cones. I can show you this one that's here on my kind of sample finished piece. So this one's these you can find in like at Michael's, at Joann's. I like to go to the website Shipwreck Beads. Um, Shipwreck Beads is local to me. It's about half a mile down the road. Um, but for other people, it's a little bit harder to get there. So, but they do ship, and Shipwreck Beads has a whole lot more. just look like this. Someone asked if they could see it again. So it's just a simple metal cone. It's got a hole through it. So you can find those at most craft stores in the jewelry section. They're pretty easy to find now. They used to be a lot harder to find. Luckily, they're much more accessible these days. All right, so we're going to talk about this, and then I have a video to show. So, beginning the weave. So, you're going to wrap your wire around your 2 to 3 fingers. I prefer to use 3 fingers. It gives you just a little bit bigger loop to work with. And you wrap it around as many times as you would like loops in your necklace. So, and the loops add complexity. The loops add complexity to your weave. So I wouldn't start with more than 6 to begin with. But I wouldn't go less than 5, because if you go 4, it's going to be more of a square. If you go 3, it's going to be more kind of triangle-y. So I would recommend 5 or more. I've gone as much as 10 or 11. I don't go any more than that, but I've seen other people go a lot more than that. So once again, you can play with that. But I would recommend for this to start with 5 or 6. So once you have that done, it's going to look like this. You're going to twist the top third of it to create kind of, it looks kind of like a person, right? It's just standing there with their arms open. And then with that, you're actually going to open up the wire so that it looks kind of like a daisy, like this. So each of the loops is folded out flat. And once that's done, you're going to bend it over so that it looks kind of like a flower, or not a flower. You bend your flower over your dowel. That's what I mean. It already looks like a flower. Doesn't matter if the petals of your flower don't line up as evenly as you spread them out around the dowel. It does not matter. It's better if you have the kind of where the loops cross. It's better if you have only, if you have them only 2 overlaps per loop, if that makes sense. So if you have, this one is like meeting right here, and then it's meeting this one right here. So you want to spread them out relatively evenly, but they don't have to look perfect. This is going to be the garbage. We're going to end up cutting this off and throwing this away at the end. So if you don't want to use your nice wire, you can use some junk wire even if you want to. Okay, so this is our first video. And this is basically just going to show you what this will look like. Okay. So we're going to start by creating the base that we're going to weave off of. That's going to be any sort of kind of junk wire. You don't need to use like the nice wire that you're going to use for your actual weaving. You can if you want to, if that's what you have, but you can kind of use whatever you want. I'm using some audio cord right now just to make for ease of being able to see it on the video. So what you're going to do is you're going to create your loops. Loops are basically, they're going to be kind of how complex your wire weaving is going to be. So I would say I wouldn't start with any less than 5 loops. And for a beginner, I wouldn't do more than 6. I've done as much as 10. People do more than that even, but I wouldn't do any more than 6. I'm going to start with just 5 here, just to show you how you're going to do this. So I'm going to start by just wrapping my wire. And I'm going to do 5. So I'm going to make sure that I have 5 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like that. I'm going to have 5 pieces down at the bottom. The top is just going to be kind of your loose piece of wire here, right? Your loose piece of wire, and then your big piece of wire, which we can actually just snip off like that. Okay. So now you've just kind of got a series of loops of wire with two kind of antenna. You're going to take that piece, okay? You're going to take that piece and you're going to twist the top portion. Okay, so you're going to basically kind of end up with a little person, right? With just little top antenna kind of here, or arms. All right, so that's just kind of creating your base piece. Okay, did that make sense to everybody? For those of you that are following along, did you did you do you have that done? Awesome. Okay, that is an excellent start. Oops. Okay, so the second part here. So you're going to this is the next steps that we talked about previously. Here we go. Can everybody hear the video all right? Also, I just want to make sure. Okay, cool. All right. It was just me that had my volume down. All right. Okay, I'm going to mute myself and here we go. Okay, so now we're going to put our base piece to use. I've created a much bigger one so that you can see it a little bit better. All right, the first thing we're going to do with this is we're going to open it up. Okay, and it's going to basically look like a big flower, really. So, something like this. Kind of like a daisy, right? So just like that. All right, you want to try and have them as even as possible, but one of the great things about wire weaving is it's pretty darn forgiving. So having some sort of kind of daisy looking situation. Okay, now you're going to use your dowel. This is a way bigger dowel than I would normally use, but again, it's for ease of seeing it on video. So we're going to put that down around your dowel so that kind of your top little bit here is sitting at the very top, and all of those petals are now down around your dowel. Just like this. You're going to kind of want to make sure that they're spread out evenly, okay, so that none of them are really overlapping with more than two. You see that? Okay, just like that. Sorry for those little bits of pausing on the video. I was trying to make the audio louder. It was louder before. I'm not sure why it's quieter now. For some reason, it's decided to go a little quiet on me. Um, so did that make sense to everyone? Is everyone at that point? Excellent. Okay. All right. So the next step is actually starting your weave. So you're going to take your new piece of wire. You don't want this wire to be more than an arm's length. Any more than an arm's length, it's going to kink, it's going to get caught up on your dowel, you're going to have problems with it. So no longer than an arm's length. That's different for, different people. That length is different for different people. So people with shorter arms are going to have a shorter piece of wire. But that's my recommendation. It just makes things easier. You're going to take that and you're going to put it back behind where those two loops meet, one of those X's, okay? You're going to then move it around and put it back through where the next X's meet, okay? And you're just going to continue that all the way around, okay? Is my volume really low, or is it the video that you're saying is really low? Because I know that my volume is really low. That's interesting. Is that better? If I bring it a little closer? Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So these pictures are great. It's going to make more sense. Yeah, I know the PowerPoint's much lower. I'm not really sure why. It was fine before. I don't know what it's doing now. Um, so, um, so the video will make a lot more sense because you'll see it in motion. Pictures, it makes it really hard to really figure out, by in pictures how this works. So doesn't matter which loop which your loop goes. So I'm guessing that means does it matter where you start? So it doesn't matter which loop you start with. It will matter where you put the next loop. So I will show you the next video, and if you have questions after that, let me know. Okay. Let's see if we'll move this volume all the way up, and hopefully that'll be better. So now we're going to actually start our weaving. I've tied this this cord onto the thing just basically for ease because this is really floppy. But where we're going to be weaving is actually at these X's. So if you see, all your petals have created X's, right? So there's one petal, there's the other petal here, and it's created an X at each of these points. That's actually what we're going to be weaving off of. Okay, so we're going to start with an X. So let's start with this one. Okay. Again, just ignore these little knots. That's just for ease. This is a lot floppier than normal wire. So the way we're going to weave is we're going to take our wire and we're going to put it back behind here. We're going to go behind this X, behind both wires of the X. So we're going to bring it in here and out over here. Okay. Just like that. Okay, so it's back behind both. And then you just pull it through. Okay. And then we're going to go on to the next one. And we're moving away around counterclockwise from where we're weaving. So here's your next X. Again, we're going to go in here and out there. Okay. All right. Going to just follow that around. There's another one in here and out there. I'll pause for a second. I can't actually type in here while the video is going, so it pauses. So we had two questions here. The one was the dowel. I answered that kind of at the beginning. Yeah, the dowel it doesn't matter what what size you weave with, but it will change what the weave looks like, if that makes sense. So, and then the question that was related to what we're looking at right now, do you normally tie off the wire? I don't normally tie off the wire. For the audio wire that I got, normally I teach with audio wire, normally it's a lot stiffer than this, but this stuff is really not stiff at all. And so I tied it off so that I wouldn't have to continue futzing with it during the video. So yeah, normally you don't tie it off, you just kind of hold it with your thumb and it'll stay. Next one. Okay. In here, out there. And then in here, out there. Right, and then I like to, on that last one, the one you started with, technically it's the first one, I like to actually do it again just to kind of lock it all in place. So you'll have one that has two on it, right? So that way it's a little bit easier. It's not going to be pretty, but the beginning doesn't really have to be pretty. I mean, really, this is just going to get cut off at the end. So now you've got this. So you've got all these little loops. Now we're going to continue on. We're going to continue on here to that next X. Okay, and where we're going to weave is actually behind here. So we're going to weave. We're going to bring our wire. We're going to bring our wire in here and out there, just like we did with the X's up above. Just like that. Okay. We'll do it again. Again, it's in here and out there. In here, out there. In here, out there. Okay, then we've come back to the beginning. So go ahead and just go the same thing. In there, out there. Because now what you've created is a second row of X's. And you're just going to continue weaving like you were before. So you're going to go in here, go in here, go out there. And just continue on until you run out of wire. All right, so for those of you who are following along at home, does that make sense? We can play this video again if you need to look at it again. Basically, all you're doing is you are taking the, taking the wire, putting it back behind that X, and then pulling down over and over and over and over again. It's, I mean, once you have that one move, you pretty much have it. That's one of the reasons that I love, yes, exactly, repeat forever. So my wire is getting little kinks before the next X. That's really just a matter of practice. You might want to start with a little bit shorter wire to start with, just so that you can get kind of the feel of how to move the wire. You're probably just pulling it in a way that it's probably got some little twists in it as you're pulling, and that's creating those kinks. That's really just a matter of practice. I promise it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. So yeah, that's the kind of the thing. One of the things that I love about this is when I learned how to wire weave. I had very small children, and I could very easily just put this down and deal with what I needed to deal with, and then um, and then pick it back up even a year later if I needed. Um, and uh, and you know, just pick up where I left off because it's just the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah, somebody says you'll learn to feel the wire with each pass, move with the wire and not against it. Exactly. You kind of start like the way I kind of move my arm like this as I'm going, and it just kind of keeps it from uh, keeps it from twisting. Okay, so yeah, this is a really, really good point. Somebody says so many videos and books show the perfectly even rows, making it feel more disheartening getting started and not having the perfect balance to everything. I will tell you right now, it does not matter. It does not matter if you have perfect rows. Um, I, you know, you'll get some that look here. I'll show you this. Um, but it, if you can see this here, this is my weaving, okay? And you can see some of these are wider and some of them are more narrow, and that's okay. It doesn't matter. Once you run it through the draw plate, none of that's going to be seen. It all looks beautiful and even. Do not be discouraged by pictures of perfect rows because it doesn't matter. All, you know, and everybody's looks a little bit different, and that's okay. Once it runs through the draw plate, you don't see any of that. So that's another really great thing about this. You know, I actually taught my daughter to do this when she was about 5. You know, and you know, hers, some of them were really, really wide and some of them were really tight. And if you have one that's, you know, if you feel like it's a problem, like it's way too wide, you can slowly adjust that as you're weaving with your tension, right? So as you're weaving, you just tighten up one side a little bit more and loosen up the other side a little bit more, and it'll slowly kind of come back down and become more even if it's bothering you. It bothers me because I like the kind of, you know, even look, but really it doesn't matter. So don't get disheartened by looking at perfect pictures of rows because it doesn't actually matter. Does anybody have any more questions about this step? How tight should the loops be? Mine are very tight. I like to keep mine really super tight. Um, you can have them more loose, but I think it's better to have them tighter, just because I think it keeps everything when you're drawing it through. It makes a more dense looking necklace, and it makes it so that um, it's less likely to, if it gets, you know, something pushes against it, it gets squished, if that makes sense, you know, because it's still hollow inside, right? So this, when I squish it, it's not going anywhere. But if you have a little bit looser loops, I think that that would be more likely to get squished. Are there different stitches or is it all the same one? So it's all the same stitch. It's all the same stitch. You can make it look more complex by um, basically by instead of weaving on the lowest X, you weave on the X above it. So you're basically doubling up the density of the wires. Um, so that's, I mean, but that's really the only difference. It's all the same stitch. That's one of the reasons I love this. It's one of those things that looks crazy complex, but is actually very easy to do. Once upon a time at past events, I noticed some weave with the flower under instead of on top. Is there any difference? I don't think there, so basically they were weaving like this instead of like this. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that really makes a difference. That's just really a matter of how you were taught and preference. Yeah, I don't think that that would make any sort of difference. Oops. Okay. Someone asks, can you do this with multiple colors? Which is perfect timing for this because yes, you absolutely can do this with multiple colors. So all you would do is as you're adding your wire, you just grab a different color wire and you add a different color wire as you go. You can't really do it so that the different colors are down. You can only do them so that they're horizontal, not vertical. In order to do it horizontally, it would yeah, I just can't see that being functional. Yeah, you can also run two wires at once. Yeah. So you can do all sorts of stuff. I had a friend who used to, as they were weaving, put beads in it. You just have to be really careful when you draw that through a draw plate, because that's not necessarily going to work well. You may have to draw it more by hand. But you can put beads in it. You can do all sorts of different things. But the multiple colors thing is really handy because that's actually the next step is adding new wire. Oh, that's cool. If one of somebody's friends has a draw plate which opens up to allow the bead to pass through. That's really cool. That's a really neat thing. I'll have to look for one of those. That is, however, not something that you see in period, just just for the record. But it is a really fun thing to play with. And, I've made these for my mom. I've made these for, my family, um, who is not involved in any sort of historical reenactment. So they're just beautiful necklaces. So you can use them in any way you want, really, which is the cool thing. Okay, so in adding your wire, um, this is another thing that people take the class and then they forget after they get home how to do this, which is it's really handy that these classes are now that are these classes are recorded, and so you can come back to it and look at it again, and the PowerPoint will also be available on the blog post that the video is posted on my webpage. So all right, so once you're adding wire to your weaving, so you continue to weave until you have about an inch of wire left, or until you can't weave anymore. Um, I some people, I wouldn't do any like I wouldn't leave any less than about an inch, but if you can't weave anymore when it's 2 inches long or 3 inches long, that's fine too. Um, the uh, the other thing you can do is you can take your pliers and use them instead of your fingers to pull on it, and that makes it so that it's a little bit easier to get a little more of that wire woven instead of being cut off at the end. So you weave it until you have to stop. You cut another arm's length piece of wire. You take the end of that wire and you bring it back through that last X that you looped through backwards. So if you can see this loop, we've gone like this, right? That kind of normal motion that we've been doing. We've been going from the right hand side through to the left hand side and down. Okay. So from uh, the next one, you're going to follow the path of the wire that you'd used before backwards. So you're going to bring your end through from the left side into the right side. Okay. That is basically just going to lock the wire in place. So you're going to have a length of short wire here, which was your original end, and then you're going to have another length on the other side, which is the other end. And then you just continue to weave. That's all you do. You just put that wire on from the other side, and then you just continue on the same direction you were weaving before. All right. When you get back to this piece, you're going to weave those in basically so that that loop that you create kind of grabs onto those. Once you've done a couple of rows, you can you can take that wire, that excess wire, and just snip it off as close as you can. It just avoids getting extra little pokey bits that stick out when it's an actual necklace. All right, so let's do this video. To see how this works. So I've woven this until I've run out of wire. Yours is going to be a lot longer. It's going to go down a lot farther, but because, you know, for scale, I mean, I can't use as much wire basically to get it to that length. So obviously this is not long enough to make anything, right? So we're going to need to add some wire to that. I'm going to use green to contrast so that we can kind of see what we're doing. So you've got that last piece, right, that if you kept going, it would go around to this next X. Okay. What you're actually going to do is you're going to take the new wire. Okay, you're going to take the new wire and you're actually going to take it back around. So the direction that this wire was coming from, it came like this, right? So you're actually going to, like I said, yeah, it came like this. So you're actually going to take your new wire and you're going to put it from here back behind. So you're going to follow the path backwards. You're going to backtrack your wire. So it's going to end up going from here around. Okay, so you're going to go in here and out here. In here and out here. All right, so now you have, you can see now you have this wire coming down on this side, right? And this wire is your old wire. All right. So now that new length can continue. And you just continue on like you have been. Okay. So we'll go around because then I'm going to show you what you do with that kind of excess wire. Okay. All right, so now we're back to our original here. So for that, when you do this weaving, so you're going to go in on this side and out on this side, just like normal. Okay, just make sure that these extra wires get tucked underneath in here so that they're not kind of flying out. Okay, and you're going to do that for kind of a couple of turns. So this is going to go underneath just like your normal weaving. If I can get it to go underneath. There we go. So just like your normal weaving. And then you can see that's kind of, it's kind of hugging those other ones. Okay, so you're just going to continue to do that. I usually do that for a couple of times around, and then I snip off as much of that as I possibly can, and that just keeps you from getting little pokey bits into your necklace or bracelet or whatever you're making. Okay, sorry about, I know sometimes the video, the dowel kind of goes down below the video. It's really because this wire is so floppy, it's really hard to get through. So I have to get close to it in order to get it to move. So these were the best videos I could get of it. So did that make sense to everyone? Awesome. Does anybody have any questions up until this point? Oh, good. Somebody says lots of little things I didn't pick up last time around, feeling much more confident already. I'm so glad to hear that. Um, I'm having problems with the later stitches where the join is. So are you having problems getting it back behind there? Yes. Okay. So yes, that is a problem because there's a lot of material in that one space. So there are a couple of ways you can solve that. Um, what I tend to do, um, what I tend to do is take my weave off. I can't show you with the big one here because I can't pull it off of there. But I take my weave off and then I do my X and then I just put it back on the dowel because it's strong enough that you can do that. The other thing that you can do if you're really nervous about taking it off of the dowel is you can just you can carve a little indent into your dowel so that if you're having trouble, you can move your weaving to that point where the little indent is, so that you can just tuck your wire, so you can weave your wire back behind all of that mass. If that does that make sense? You can, yeah, you can also do that. Somebody suggests using awl to lift up and make a space, if you have one, or I use my fingers sometimes, or a pin to push it up. Yep. Yeah, my very first dowel, when I actually took this class, the dowel that they gave us had a little indent in it. Yeah, there's all sorts of little tricks you can use. Somebody says a quilter's needle, a pin, and all your fingers. Any number of things you can use to kind of push that up. Or if you do an indent, or you can just pop it off if it's still being a pain in the neck. Um, just be sure not to yank on it too much when you pull it off of there. Somebody says they found their tweezers helpful. Yeah, that would be another good one to use. Absolutely. Let me see if anybody else has any other questions up until this point. Hmm. The weave and tightness and distance from the X to the next one changed with the new wire, though my tension and draw strength seems the same. Is there a trick for that? I I can't it it shouldn't the changing of the wire shouldn't change the tension or anything, the tightness or distance. Um, you can just kind of I would just play with it a little bit, um, and you know, to get the tension where you want it to be. I don't think that the wire itself, changing the wire should actually make the difference. Um, if you're meaning that very first one, it's just you may need to pull harder on that first loop to get it to, to get it to sit the same as everything else. And it may not look exactly the same. Yeah, and if you're brand new to it, it's not going to look perfect. You have to remember, yeah, exactly. Practice will help. You have to remember that, what you're seeing on the videos, I've been doing this for about 12 years. And um, so it looks easy. But that's just with practice. So your first one may not look perfect. It may look perfect. Some people pick up on it really fast. Some people it takes a little bit more time. But the great thing is it's really just kind of a couple little things that you tweak to get it to work really nicely. So are we good to move forward for everybody? All right, fantastic. Okay, so Somebody said a 49-year-old kindergarten artisan. You know what? Everybody starts somewhere, right? And I think it's awesome. And this is a really great thing that you can do while we're home right now, right? While we're sitting and we're waiting to be able to be together again. Um, and and it takes some time, but it's a really nice thing to be able to give as a gift, to wear as largesse, all sorts of, and you can use it in a lot of ways. I've used it as chain for things, not just necklaces. So it can be a really kind of handy thing to have around. I actually made a coronet for a court barony that their majesties gave a few years ago. And I used really tiny, really tiny wire weaving. I think I used 30 gauge wire to make really, really tiny wire weaving. And then I actually wove that together with the pearls in between, and it looked really, really cool. Which was not in any, it wasn't period at all, but it looked really neat. I really loved the way it ended up. So there's all sorts of ways you can play with it. Yes, because I do this during court, sitting off to the side with pre-cut pieces of wire, usually outdoor court. Yeah, it's a great thing to, the only trick, this is my poor family can attest to this. The only trick is try to keep your little bits of wire that you're cutting off in one place. And it's hard though. Sometimes they just go flying, but they do act like needles, little needles on your carpet. So if you're walking around barefoot, those do not feel good if you step on them. So, just try and be careful with that. And if you're at an event and you're outside, really make sure to keep those, you know, in one place, because, a lot of people walk around barefoot at events and you really can't see them in the grass. So you really don't want to hurt anybody else. Yeah, so they have a little plastic tub for wire scraps. Um, oh, perfect. Handing it off to a metalsmith friend of mine to melt down, which if it's actual silver, that's such a great idea, right? Use up what you have. All right, so let's move on here. Okay, so using your draw plate, it's actually very simple, and there's a video of it to show you. Um, So you just take your weaving off of the dowel, and as you're weaving, so it's going to just keep looking like this. And the longer you weave it, the longer this is going to be. If if it's so long that you can't hold on to it, or if you want to hold it here or however, you can have this stay like this, undrawn, as long as you want to. All you need to do is just move this up a little bit, and it'll just stay. So you just continue to move that up, and you'll end up with, this much sticking up off of it, and that's fine. That works just fine. So, okay, so you should plan on having about a third additional length once you run your weaving through your draw plate. So in other words, your weaving will get about a third more longer than what it was before. So that's a good way to kind of estimate um, how long your necklace is going to be. If your necklace gets too long, it's better for it to be too long than too short, because if it's too short, you can't really add more after you draw it through. But if it's too long, you can just cut it off. So it's better for it to be too long. People always ask me, how long should I make it, or how long do I, really estimate? That's really a hard thing to estimate, because it really depends on the number of loops you have, the size of your dowel, and the hole that you're drawing it through. So it's really hard to fully estimate, just because there are so many different variables that you can't fully plan for that. Once you're weaving, and and you can get a little bit of a feel of it. But I am I'm not good at being patient. So for me, what tends to happen is I end up with a lot of this, where I'm weaving. I won't normally have the cone on the end. That's just because I was teaching with this one. Um, but I'll end up with it partially drawn, so I could see what it looks like and how long it is, and then I just move, and then I just continue to weave on the bottom here. So, which you can totally do, just really be sure, either leave it on the dowel when you're drawing it, or um, or just be really sure not to pull it all the way through, because once you pull it all the way through, it's done. You can't weave it anymore. So you just start with your largest hole on your draw plate. So this is the original big hole in this draw plate. This is just FYI, I've had this draw plate for about 12 years. I actually or longer. I got this draw plate in the class that I took to learn how to wire weave. So it's oak, it's lovely, and it's lasted forever. I decided I wanted another small hole, so I drilled another small hole in here. So you start with your largest hole on your draw plate and you run the length through each hole until you're at the size you want. Again, if you draw it too small, it'll lock it into place and no longer be flexible. So don't overdo it. So if you're doing a 22 gauge wire and you're drawing it through and you draw it down too tight, it's going to make it stiff. Okay. Don't be afraid of that. That doesn't happen unless you draw it way too tight. Like if you're drawing it through and you have to really rank on it, then you might be drawing it too tight. But odds are you're not going to do that with your wire because it's not going to feel good on your hands, to be perfectly honest. Okay, so here is the video of this actual one being drawn. All right, so we're going to talk about drawing your wire now. I'm not going to draw this all the way through because I'm not actually done weaving it, but this is what your weaving will look like in actual wire as you go, and is exactly why I'm not showing you on videos how to do it with actual silver wire, because it's really difficult to see. But this part I don't need to show you the kind of intricacies of it, so I can show you with the real wire what it's going to look like. So I'm going to run it through a draw plate, and this is an oak, a piece of oak with just some holes gradually getting smaller drilled in it. You can buy them. There are a few places you can buy them. I actually have links in the event page for that. But you can just get a piece of hardwood. I prefer hardwood just because it lasts longer. So you just take it and drill a few holes in it that are smaller and smaller. So in order to make this look like something that's usable for a necklace or something like that, you're going to run it through your draw plate. You're going to start with your biggest hole, okay? And you're going to pull it through, okay? Just like that, okay? And I like to do it at least twice. And then you're going to just run it through your holes 2 times each until you get down to a size that you like. You can see this is a new one because I'm dropping sawdust everywhere. Probably end up going down one more. Yep, that looks pretty good. So now this, and you can see the difference there and how flexible it is. So this is what it started off looking like, and that doesn't bend or anything. And this is what it turns into. It's just kind of flexible piece. So I kind of call that the magic. That's how the magic happens with wire weaving. So yeah, that is how you run it through the draw plate. All right, that's my favorite part of wire weaving, to be honest, because I love taking it from, from looking like that to looking like this, to looking like an actual flexible piece. Does anyone have any questions on that? That one's a pretty basic one. All right, I am not seeing any questions. Are we ready to move forward? All righty. Okay. So, yeah, it really does lengthen. Somebody says, wow, it really does lengthen. Yeah, it lengthens quite a bit. It's really cool to see the kind of transformation of it. Um, and again, you can do when you draw through, you can do it to where it stays really open and loose. The only trick to that is that it can be destroyed pretty easily. The very first piece that I ever made in the first class that I took, um, the person who taught it um, really liked the look of the big open weave and encouraged people to leave it really open, which isn't something you really see in period. And I think, and I don't ever do, because that first piece was destroyed within a week of living in my house because I had a 2-year-old at the time, and she destroyed it. So because it just gets squished, it just stays really open. Um, how do you draw without a plate? So you can draw without a plate, just kind of with your hands. You can kind of slowly, kind of pull it down. It doesn't work as well, and it's not as consistent. Um, oh yeah, that's a good point too. Somebody says if you keep it large like that, your hair can get caught in it too. So yeah, that's a problem. Um, that's a very good point. Um, so I would really recommend drawing with a plate, um, if you can. It just, and if you can't afford to buy a plate, getting a piece of wood and just drilling a couple holes, or having a friend drill a couple of different size holes in it, will work really nicely as a draw plate. So it's pretty inexpensive. That's another thing I love about this, is that it doesn't take a lot of money to get started. Whereas, as I'm sure we all know, so many things that we do cost so much money to get started on. And this, you need a stick, a draw plate, a couple pairs of pliers, and some wire. So, um, yeah, what typical hole sizes are on the plate? That's a really good question. Um, I really don't pay attention to the size of holes. I usually just, I want one that's a little bit smaller than 1/2 inch, because that's the size of my dowel. Um, and then uh, and then I just um, uh, sorry, um, and then I just kind of pick ones that are just kind of progressively smaller. Um, so the sizes themselves, there's not really an exact size that you need. Um, you don't need anything smaller than yeah, somebody says they're starting at the beadsmith one is starting at 10 millimeters and getting down to 0.5 millimeters. Um, so yeah, if you drill one, just pick the sizes that you like, and just make sure they're progressively smaller. Um, and if you don't have one that's small enough for you, you can drill another hole. And that's actually that initial draw plate that I had. It didn't have a hole that was small enough, and so I actually drilled a couple extra holes in it. Yeah, somebody says if we can get the name of the person who created the custom draw plate for the beads, we could keep them busy. Yeah, that's a really cool idea. All right, so the final thing here is finishing the piece. Um, so I end up with so many of these little pieces like this that have a cone at the end, so that I can, teach this part of it. And this is actually the one that I did in the videos, but not in these pictures, because I did these pictures at a different time as the videos. So once you are to your desired length of wire, cut off your flower. Sorry about that. We had a firework go on. Cut off your flower, um, and bring the end of your wire through the ends of the weaving a few times. So you can see that this is the end of the weaving here. So you're just drawing that extra little length of wire that was at the beginning. You're just drawing it through those beginning loops. Okay. And you're doing that a few times to keep it really well locked into place. Okay. Take your 20 gauge wire, 20 or 18, and bring it through your weaving in several different directions to anchor it in. So you can see the thicker wire here has been brought through those top loops. Okay. And then you just kind of bring it through a few times in a couple of different directions, right? So you can see like right here, it's there. So I just kind of bring it through and then bring it through again this direction and bring it through again this direction so that it's good and locked into place. Okay. So then you end up with this little short piece that was kind of your beginning of your wire that you wove. And then you have a shorter piece on one side here and a much longer piece on the other. Okay, you're going to bring all of those pieces through your cone. Okay, and when you bring them through your cone, pull it down really tight to get it kind of down as wedged in there as well as you can. Maybe grab your pliers and yank on it pretty good. You're going to create a loop by using your round pliers. So you're the round ones. Okay. And you kind of pick the distance you want. Okay, so you can start it here or bring it down a little more or bring it up a little more. And these round pliers, they're going to help you kind of pick what size loop you want there. Okay, because if you have it up here, you're going to end up with a bigger loop at the end than if you have it all the way down here. Okay. So you create a loop by taking one of the long piece of the 18 or 20 gauge wire and just bringing it around that plier, the one side of the plier, to make a circle. And then you just wrap it around these bottom pieces, all the 3 pieces of wire. Just kind of coil it down and coil it down and coil it down until you reach the bottom of your cone or the top of your cone. Okay. And you can kind of move it around, move the kind of all that coil and loop to one side to kind of bring that in tighter and tighter until you've got it really, really well locked into place. And then once that's done, you just snip off the excess and it's finished. And it should end up looking like this. You can do this with just wire. I prefer to use a cone because you're less likely to kind of get those loose little pieces of wire that poke into people's necks. I think it's for me it's a matter of preference too. I like this look because it's a little bit cleaner of a look. But basically, if you don't want to do it this way, then you could just do the same thing and then just continue to wrap that thicker wire around your weaving until you get down to a length that you want that wire to be at. And you could create a cone that way as well if you didn't want to buy cones. All right, so I believe this is our final video. This will show you how that works. All right, now we're going to talk about finishing it, adding a cone to it. So you can get cones. This is just one example of a cone. You can get them at craft stores. Again, I did add some links on the post, on the blog post or the event page about where to get all the supplies for these. So that's going to be your cone. You can get them in all sorts of different sizes. I like to get them so that they're pretty close to the size that that your weaving is going to be, so that way it slips in kind of nicely. So what you've ended up with is this is the beginning here. This is kind of what your little daisy has turned into. So we don't need that anymore. It's completely separate from the actual weaving itself. So we're going to snip that off. I'm just going to take it and cut those pieces. Okay. So there's our little bit. And then I can kind of work all those little crazy pieces out. Just be careful because one of them is your actual end. So that one. Okay. So now you've got your weaving. All right. If you were to pull on this end right now, you could pull all of this weaving out, and that would be really sad. So you need to kind of anchor it in place. And the best way to do that is to take your end here and run it through your wire, run it through those loops. So it's kind of hard to see here, but I'm going to just make sure that I run it through a few times. Kind of see where those loops are a little bit. I'm going to make sure to run it through a few of them, and I'm going to try and hit all of them, because if you don't hit all of them, it can actually, your weave can still pull out when it's a necklace. I've had that happen before. So I'm going to run it through a few times. That's going to lock it in place. And obviously, generally, you're going to do this when you have two ends, right, and a finished piece. I can't tell you how many of these little bits that look like this with a cone on the end I have from teaching this class. So now you've got just all the little bits here. I'm going to put them off to the side so that they're out of the way. I'm going to pause for a second because I had a couple of questions here. I think a couple of them have probably been answered, but I just want to address them really quickly. Somebody asked if you wrap just one of the ends of the three. You wrap just one of the ends of the three. What do you do with the other two? You're wrapping all three of those ends, not just one of them. So you are wrapping all three of them. The other question is how can I tell what size of cone works with the finished product? My cones always seem to be too large for the finished product. Honestly, really the best way to do that is just get a bunch of different cones, and a bunch of different cones. Cones are going to be different sizes. And so just get different sized cones, and different sized cones are going to work with different necklaces, right? So I have some that are really tiny, and I have some that are bigger. That's really the only recommendation I have for that. They can be a little bit bigger, like this one, the one that I have here, and the one that I'm showing in the video. It's actually a little bit big, right? And that's okay. It just depends on the look that you want. Eventually, you're going to find cones that you really, really like, and you'll probably want to buy a bunch of those. But really, it's just a matter of experimenting in what you like. So somebody asked, still pulling it through, and the flower is causing it to plug up and not go through. Can I remove the flower and continue pulling through? I would not recommend removing the flower until you're done pulling it through, because it holds all of your weaving in place. And if you and you don't have anywhere to really pull if you don't have that. If you're having trouble because there's a lot of wire there, I would recommend just taking your pliers and squishing it down really tight. um, and you should be able to compress it enough that it goes through the hole pretty easily. That would be my recommendation there. Okay, I'm going to continue the video. Okay, so now you're going to take a heavier gauge of wire. Okay, this is 20 gauge wire. I prefer to use, so generally with weaving, I'm using a 24 gauge wire or a 22 gauge wire. For your ends, I would recommend a 20 gauge at least. If your hands can handle it, go for an 18 gauge. So you're going to do the same thing with this one, this heavier wire. You're going to bring it through the kind of first section here. You're going to leave a big piece of it long, right? And you're going to just bring it through, and bring it through a couple of times so it's kind of nicely anchored in place. Don't be afraid to use your pliers and really kind of yank on it. to get it nice and locked in. Okay. Okay. So now what I've got is this is the original end right here. Okay. That's the new wire. That's the short end, and that's the long end. Okay. So now what we need to do is get our cone on. Just going to take our cone, slide it on, and then make sure that we can actually probably just snip this one off. The little one, the lighter weight wire, we can snip that off so it's out of the way. But we want to get both of these pieces of the heavier gauge, we want to get that through the cone. Okay, and once you've got that cone on there, pull on it pretty good to get it as kind of tight in there as you can, kind of locked in. Okay. All right. So now you're going to take a round nose plier. This is kind of a round nose plier. I couldn't actually find my round nose pliers. So this should work though. So the further, let me get it right, the good angle here. There we go. So the further that I slide this on, the bigger my loop is going to be at the end of my necklace. So I'm going to want a pretty small loop. So I'll go about there. And then I just take that thicker one and I wrap it around. Okay, you can see that it's wrapped around the top of the plier. Okay, and then I'm going to take the wire and I'm going to wrap it around itself in this area. And I'm just going to wrap that to where it starts here and then bring it down as tightly as I can onto that cone. So it kind of tightens it up, gets everything kind of nice and strong. So if you can see that. And then I'll even kind of tip it to the side to get more wire in, to get it really good and strong. And then when I get to the point that I'm comfortable with, see, you can see where that's kind of, where it's wrapped around right here. There's your loop. I'm going to snip off the rest of this. Get it a little bit smaller. There we go. And then I'm going to just squeeze that into place. And then what you end up with is a loop, but then you have that little bit from the short side still sticking up. So I'm going to just bend that over. Okay, I'm going to bend that over and snip it off as closely as I can to my loop. And then I can kind of bring that around. Then I've got kind of a nice loop right there at the end of my piece. Now you can get like a little jeweler's anvil and hammers and stuff and harden that a little bit. You just tap it. You lay it on the little anvil and you tap it with a like a jeweler's hammer, and that'll harden that a little bit so that it doesn't yank out of place. But I haven't had too much issue with it just the way it is. So that would be how you end your piece. This looks like it's a little bit out still. But this is the big trick. You want to make sure that this is as clean as possible here, that there's no little wire bits sticking out, because that's where you're going to catch your clothing. That's where you're going to scratch yourself. So that's a good place to keep it really good and clean. So that's what that ends up looking like. Just like that. All right, does anybody have any questions on that? Yeah, somebody says it makes more sense seeing it done in video. I agree. That's why I like having the opportunity to do the class in this kind of medium like this, because I had a blog post on it, which is great, but it doesn't have the videos, and it makes it easier if you have somebody to answer questions and stuff. Somebody asked, what about the other end? You do the same thing on the other end. You just take it off, and once it's drawn, it's going to look pretty much like the other end does, minus the little daisy that was on the top, right? So you're just going to do the same thing to the other end, and create and add the cone. So generally, what you see when these are used in, in period, is there's two cones at the front. Okay, so you've got two cones at the front. People can you can add a little, you would still add the cones to the ends with the little loops, but then on, if you want to, use it to fasten in the back, use a more simple cone, and you can do it so that you have a little clasp or something in the back, just to do it in the back. I did that for my mom. So I'm gonna stop sharing so that I can answer any other questions. But before I do that, let me just bring up, so this class and all of the other classes that we've done are available on my blog, and that's earlysweden.wordpress.com. And any upcoming classes, the list of upcoming classes, all of the events and stuff are through my artist page, and that is facebook.com/earlysweden. Um, and we will continue to do these until we don't have anybody who wants to teach. Um, so yeah, let me just stop sharing, and I can bring this all over here. Does anybody else have any other questions? All right, well, thank you guys so much for taking the class today. I will be, yes, somebody asked if I'll be sharing the PowerPoint. Yes, the PowerPoint will be also available on the blog post, and it'll have all the videos and stuff in it as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording of the class, and then if people want to pop on their videos, they'll be welcome to do that after that, and they'll be able to unmute themselves and ask any other questions, or if they want to continue weaving with someone here, we can totally do that. So thank you guys so much for attending the class today. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and hope to see you in another class soon.